What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things AI. Today, I'm very privileged to have Garg, CEO of MultiOn, the podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a
And
lot. Thanks for
yeah,
inviting me.
absolutely. So MultiOn is an agent, AI agent that takes actions and interacts with the digital world to tackle mundane tasks that people would rather delegate to an assistant. And then previously, Div has actually held positions at Stanford, NVIDIA, Apple, and Google. So with that, let's jump into the first question. But before we get into the AI questions, I want to hear about this story that I saw about some famous physics exam at Cornell that was supposedly impossible, and you were someone that was able to crack it. And then since then, they've discontinued that exam at Cornell.
Yeah, no, this was actually a funny story. So back in the day, I actually did a lot of international physics Olympiads and kind of stuff. So actually have like a lot of like medals and like international Olympiads there. And so I really like actually had a lot of interest in physics. So I was actually thinking of like going and becoming a full-time physicist. But then I decided to like actually like work in AI, and that's how I went into computer science in my undergrad at Cornell. And Cornell has this system where you can like go and like take a like you can skip classes by taking exams. So I skipped like maybe like one quarter of classes where you can just like go and like take like an exam and show like okay, like you already know all the things about the subject, so you don't have to take the class. And and I think I went and like maybe like took like 10 of those. So I got like maybe like waved off like at least one or two quarters. So that was really fun. And then so like in the physics department, I think they made this exam. So this is like for like a advanced class, and it's for like optics and waves and that kind of stuff. And they designed the exam so as to like sort of like lower down the ego of people in a sense who are coming and joining. So they just made it like impossible to solve it in a sense because like most people don't have that sort of like knowledge, and it was sort of designed to like sort of like make people like fail and take the class in a sense. And then I took the exam and actually passed the exam, so I got like a full score on that. And then they were like, okay, like what should we do? And then they sort of like I got the credit for that exam, and then they they discontinued the exam after that. So that was fun. And yeah, and I actually took like a lot of classes, and like I used to take a lot of classes in Cornell and physics just to get a lot of A pluses. So it was like, okay, like I need to like boost my GPA. Let's go take a physics class. So that was fun. Actually, have like a I got like a unofficial physics degree in a sense that I was in the wrong college. So I was in the College of Engineering, whereas you need to be in the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell to get a physics degree. And but like this sort of because I had already like finished all the course requirements and had all the requirements for the major, so they unofficially allowed me to like get like a physics major in a sense.
Amazing, amazing. Great story, great story. So kind of shifting to present tense here. I know that you have quite a lot of experience across a variety of different fields of AI, computer vision, robotics, language models, just looking at your history of where you've worked and, some of the things that you've been working on from the research side. So tell us, what was the genesis for MultiOn? And I was just mentioning to you before we kicked this off, I remember actually seeing you in one of the very early LangChain webinars, must have been back in like May of 2023. So just kind of walk us through, like, how did you guys get started and what motivated you to create the company?
Totally. So I'll say initially it started as a side project where I was actually doing two other jobs. So I was teaching at Stanford for this class I created called CS25 on transformers, and I was also working in a robotics startup as a founding engineer. And this was just after ChatGPT came out. So this was almost 1 year ago, last January in 2023. And I just really wanted something that can go and do things for me. Like, okay, I just want something that can like order me coffee or do my tasks and send my emails. And I was like, really excited about that. And so I started working on like a Multown as a side project on weekends and evenings. And I was like, okay, like I just want to build this AI that can go do things for me. And then we did, and then like worked on it for like maybe like a couple of weeks, maybe like roughly 3 weeks before we had the first prototype out. And then I made this demo where like the AI can go and buy you a burger on DoorDash. And I put that on like Twitter, and it just went super viral. It just like we got like 1 million views and like crazy amount of people coming in, and like a lot of random people actually started calling me and like reaching out to me, and was like so just like a crazy thing. And then just saw there was like a lot of demand. Like everyone was coming to me, okay, like we want you to go and actually do this, solve this problem, and like we really want to use this thing. I also did a lot of surveys around like okay, how are people willing to like pay for this? And we got like so I put like a type form online, okay, like here's what I'm thinking of building, here's how much are you willing to pay, how will you what do you use it for, stuff like that. And we got like 10,000 people to like sort of fill that out just from like Twitter. And it was just like crazy to see the demand there. And it just seemed like okay, like the everyone really wants it. And that's sort of what motivated me to okay, like let's go and actually go and build this thing so that people can actually use AI in their everyday life. And then that's sort of what we started me on the journey, where like people thought like I was very crazy because we were competing with like companies like Adapt, for example. So that's a company that has raised $500 million dollars in cash. And people are like, okay, like why do you want to go drop out of your PhD and compete with a company that has $500 million? And so it was just like a very fascinating sort of like race in that sense. But like I think like it has turned out pretty well for us overall.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the crazy thing is like, like what, a couple of years ago, we've seen more of the enterprise conversational AI platforms begin to implement RPA and things of that nature, right? But I think even then, right, we were still using a lot of supervised models for language classification. Dialogue managers were still, very much rules based. And a lot of these things took a lot of effort, So what do you kind of see as the kind of that turning point that makes it kind of easier to do that today, versus, even a couple years ago?
Totally. No, I think technology itself is a turning point. The technology was not there like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. A lot of companies spend a lot of time doing RPA. Even if you look at like Alexa or Siri, they were like 10,000 people teams and they didn't make too much progress. But now, even if you want to do something like natural language translation, that used to be like crazy amount of people, but not much success. And now what you do is you take a lot of this data on the internet, train a model, and that works. And I think the technology is always like a barrier where like once you have the right technology, then you can unlock a lot of those things. And I think one thing that's going to happen is like a lot of this was heuristics or manual human effort, where like you just put a lot of humans and they're writing code or like if else loops conditions to solve this problem. But now I think what's will happen is like you really won't need that many humans or programmers. It becomes like you take a lot of data, a lot of the right sort of inputs, outputs, put that in a giant model that can learn the right structure, can generalize. And I think that's how I think a lot of these problems will get solved, especially things where like even like a simple layer of intelligence can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess maybe a good segue is, kind of from a high level, help us kind of understand how does multi-on actually work?
Sure.
Because, or maybe, and also give an example for the folks that maybe haven't had the chance
Sure.
to use multi-on. I mean, I've been using the beta quite a lot, but for those that haven't seen it, walk them through like what a use case would be and then kind of how it works at a high level.
Totally. Yeah, so in a sense, like how we envision it, it's sort of like your personal agent. So it's like this AI that's going out and doing things for you, which could be interacting with your personal accounts, with services, potentially like doing transactions for you. And it's made to be very general purpose. So you can use it for like shopping online, buying books on Amazon. You can use it to call a Uber. You can use it to buy groceries on Instacart. You can also potentially use it to send emails. I actually use it every day to send like say like DocuSigns and NDAs to people. So I'm just like, oh, like can you send an NDA to this person, this email, and it actually goes and does it, or like send a LinkedIn Connect request to someone. A really good example I do is like sort of like wish happy birthday to friends on Facebook, and it actually just goes and like wishes it. And like, I think I have a lot of friends who are like, oh, they you like you wish a lot of happy birthdays, or like, oh, thanks for wishing me happy birthday. And I was like, okay, sure, thanks. And so just like in a sense, we are trying to solve this general purpose AI assistant question that I think a lot of companies have tried to tackle. But now I think we've gotten further than most people. And then the question becomes like, okay, how do we do that really well? How do we build like safety, failover detection, and like, okay, like how do we deploy this to every single person on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good point about that happy birthday use case. So like, what is the use case that you use the
Sure.
most? Yeah.
I would say on a daily basis, I almost use it as my admin.
Mm.
Where like initially, like my process was like instead of me doing something, I should just like make it better to do something. So I was basically using it for everything that I can do. And so I've been using it a lot every day right now for maybe like definitely like sending documents or NDAs kind of stuff to people, DocuSigns. I've also been using it a lot for like travel. So if I want to call like a Uber from home to office or back, stuff like that. So I'm basically predominantly just using MultiOn to like do all of that for me. It's also really good at like managing my schedule. So it knows my schedule. I also use it to like send like invitations to people. Okay, let's grab a coffee at 2 p.m. and then we can like tell it to MultiOn and we'll go and send the invites, do all the calendaring stuff automatically. And so those are like very like sort of like almost like admin or executive assistant kind of use cases that it's really useful at. And then it's also really good at a lot of maybe like a very simple like task you have to do. So like suppose you want to like change some setting in your backend on AWS, you want to configure like someone, you want to like spin up a new EC2 instance. So it's actually very good at like a lot of these jobs too, like inviting people to like a GitHub repo or adding someone to like a Slack channel. And it can actually just go and do these things where like if you were to do it yourself, you think about it, then maybe you'll put it in a to-do or something, or you have to like spend some time going and doing that. But here it just becomes like we think of it, give it to the agent goes and instantly does it, and it just saves you so much time because now you're just operating on like the level of like thought or like language, and you don't have to worry actually like do the things yourself, and so you can just free up so much of your own time and make yourself so much more productive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this was kind of the idealistic vision people had for Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant that never quite came to fruition. I mean,
Right.
is there anyone in the community today that has maybe set up like a Raspberry Pi, and then maybe like some sort of VM and actually using it as like a smart speaker? Because that would be amazing to do that.
And totally. I think we also have built like a voice mode, so you can actually talk with it and talk back with you. We went with sort of like a Jarvis kind of voice. I think like sounds similar to like maybe like an English butler currently. There's like a British butler accent, and we might like refine that a bit. But it's been fun to have your computer talk to you in a sense, and I think a lot of people really like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I look forward to using that. And from what I saw on the website, it looks like there was an app that is coming out. So why don't you share a little bit about the roadmap for this year? And, also like what is your vision for this company?
Totally. So I would say we are a bit secretive about the app right now because there's like a lot of competition in the space. So the app is going to be very exciting. So I think like look out for that. And also don't want to like spoil the surprise. But I think in a sense we're targeting a lot of consumer use cases. So how can we help people on the go when they can ask an AI to do things to solve a lot of the things they don't have to do it manually. And then I think that's going to be really exciting as a frontier because there we also see the world evolving. As a company, I think the next thing for us is how can we improve people's life? I think that's what we think about it. Like a lot of things are going to change in the society, like how you interact with technology, how you do things in the digital world. And everything will become from like a solo experience, how you have right now, to more of a collaborative experience. Where you're talking with this AI, the AI will be doing all the low level gritty stuff in a sense. And what we think about a lot as a company, like how do we do this really well? How do we make sure we don't accidentally cause any sort of like malicious harm? How do we sort of like build the right things and like deploy them in a way where like someone can't misuse them? So because there might be potentially bad actors out there who might go and like start misusing this sort of like new technology to try to build viruses and stuff like that. And so we want to like do this in a very safe manner where like, okay, like can we be like a positive force for humanity in general to like sort of like take this new agentic technology, deploy it out, but also in a very productive manner where like, okay, like it overall causes like better future in a sense like, for the society and not lead us to some sort of like Skynet kind of scenario.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good thought for sure. So speaking of like kind of the AI landscape in 2024, right? I mean, I think when ChatGPT came out, it was kind of peak hype, right? And we had LangChain, and I feel like there was everyone talking about bots or agents. And I think as these hype cycles tend to happen, like the reality just wasn't where people's expectations were kind of lying, right? So, what is your expectation for 2024? Do you think we're going to see agents get very good this year and kind of have some of those issues solved? Or are there other thematics that you kind of see this year?
Totally. So obviously I think there'll be a lot of progress in the agent space. It's still early though. But I think like what happened is we created a lot of hype, especially on GPT-4. So when GPT-4 came out, it was like a leap. And it was like a shock to everyone. So it was like a step function. And people got really excited because they were like, oh, like now everything's gonna change. Now you like can do a lot of this stuff. And it created a lot of hype cycles. And so people built like some very exciting demos and prototypes, but they were not something that you can actually use. They were like maybe like it can work 10% of the time, 5% of the time. But it was really good demos of what's possible, but not there yet. And I think like that created a big hype cycle where everyone got really excited, but that no one could deliver on that hype because the technology was not there. And I think if you think about what happened after GPT-4 is like the frontier has not changed. So if you think about the model frontier, GPT-4 is still like the state of art. There was like, this GPT-4 turbo model that came out that's maybe like slightly better, like not too, I haven't called it much better. It's like almost the same level, but just like much faster and cheaper. Um, and there's been a lot of open source exploration. So like people have figured out a lot of like, okay, how do you reproduce GPT-4 on an open source basis, get closer to that. But the frontier in terms of the AI models is still GPT-4. So that has been like pretty constant from February to like maybe like currently now it's also like late January, so almost 1 year now. And I think that has caused a lot of people to get more demotivated because people thought like, okay, like now we have a step function, now it's going to go like that. But what happened is it just became like this. And I think that's sort of like what is the technology bottleneck right now. Like unless we start improving the models or like start doing custom modeling, you can't build more interesting things at all. And that's also what we're doing right now is like we have collected a lot of data. So we have more than like 500,000 interactions from testers and like a lot of like labelers we're working with. And now we are training our own models on top for agentic scenarios because we think like agent, especially actions, are very different from like language or chat in a sense. Because chat is just like human conversations, and that's sort of like the data you are training a lot of these chat models on. But we want to train our data on more like process level supervision on like doing tasks. And like we are doing a lot of stuff around like RLHF. How can you like improve trajectory level behavior? Can you do trajectory level optimization to make sure like nothing goes wrong? And I think you just have to like collect a lot of the data and train there. So similar to like how people train LLMs, you have to create your own like large action models in a sense where like the data and the scale becomes like the thing that will unlock the next capability. And luckily, I have a lot of experience doing this in a PhD where I was actually working a lot on like, okay, how do you like maybe like control robots using language and stuff like that to get actions out? And I think like so we've been using a lot of that kind of approach to build web agents in a sense. Like how do you get like really good web actions out using language and like train like maybe like complex like action transformers and things like that. So we're actually doing a lot of that stuff right now.
Oh, that's amazing. So, I guess just to, pare it back some of the things you said, it seems like, at least talking to enterprises, it seems like they really want that quality of output and consistency, right? In order to have that degree of efficacy that's required for enterprise to actually deploy this. And, I think to your point, we're slowly getting there. 2024 might be that year. And I think you kind of said, look, GPT-4 has kind of been the benchmark. Right now. So, looking at kind of other solutions, it's also starting to think about, can we orchestrate and leverage other perhaps, SLMs or custom models, and I think there's some new buzzword floating around, collection of experts, right, to utilize to drive that end outcome. So that kind of seems like the overarching themes this year in order to kind of get, agents to the place where they're more repeatable and consistent and kind of driving that quality, right, to your point.
Totally. Yeah, I think like we'll need a lot of innovations on the model space, but also beyond the model space.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So a question kind of more research based, because I know there's always that kind of, you know, trying to get the research and commercializing it is always kind of tricky, right? But there has been like quite a few, amazing research papers even in the last month or so. So, are there any like, what is the AI research paper right now that kind of most captivates you? Because I know there's been a bunch in the last couple months here.
Totally. I think that yeah, there's just like crazy the amount of research papers that are out there. Like also like I really like the Voyager work that came out. It's been a while now. Also really like DPO. Some friends with like the DPO first author from Stanford because it's basically a Stanford paper. So I know a lot of the people involved there. And and I think like those have been very interesting, and it's also been interesting to just see like a lot of work come around like maybe like how do you do more real world training at scale in a sense beyond just like the like LLMs in a sense. So now people are figuring out like okay like how do we train, how do we reinforcement learning at scale, or how do we do even like robotics at scale? And I think those sort of papers are very interesting because they have this concept of embodiment where like you're actually actuating those actions and then you can try to like use those to close the loop so you can create systems that can self-refine themselves. And I think that's going to be interesting, like this self-improvement. And I think a lot of people have been focusing on that. So a very interesting paper came out from Meta. I think this was maybe last week,
Hmm.
and they came up with this like self-improving like a llama concept, where you train a llama and then you evaluate it, give it like a feedback correction, and then you do multiple iterations, and then you can like actually be GPT-4 with enough iterations. And I think this sort of self-improvement, almost self-play as a concept, I think it's going to become very important. And people have actually been doing that a lot with there's this concept in machine learning, like there's this method in AI. It's called like generative adversarial networks, GANs. It's sort of like do this, and this was pre-LLMs. So people have tried to do this. It works decently well. I think there's some issues around like convergence and stuff like that. So people were not able to figure it out really well. But I think that was like very interesting on image generation for a while. And now it feels like those sort of methods are now starting to like apply in LLMs and like start to work there. And I think it'll be interesting to see how far can we push them. Can we sort of like build some sort of next generation models on using these methods?
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. That meta paper was super exciting. Like, I mean, just from a number of functions, right? One of them is the fact that, data annotation is really expensive, right? And
Totally.
it's like the large incumbent companies can spend billions of dollars, at some of these data annotation providers, but for open source, probably not as feasible, right? And then also like data quality and things of that nature. So yeah, it's quite promising, especially for the open source space, which, I'm curious from your perspective, like, who do you have kind of a perspective, open source versus proprietary models, or like when you think open source might catch up, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting to see. Open source is definitely starting to catch up. There's just so much innovation that's happening. Um, but I think it just becomes a quality question. I mean, like if you're OpenAI, you just have so many really, really good researchers who are the best at model training. You also have one of the best data pipelines. You can collect any data you want, get really high quality. And I think that's why like maybe like GPT-4 was almost 1 year ahead of everyone else. And so it's really interesting to see can they keep continuing that advantage, um, and to like build like bigger and better models. But I think like open source will start to catch up. So for a lot of like tasks, you don't really need like a really big model, and like you might be able to just take an open source model that's pretty good enough, and then like modify it for your use case. And I think that's what will start to happen, especially with like a lot of like local models, because that I think that's going to be like really great, and a lot of people are excited about it. If I can run a model directly on my laptop or on my phone, that's literally zero cost. And people are now paying so much to OpenAI, and then if I have something that runs like locally, that's zero cost. And I think that seems to be the future of how models will be running, where like you might just be able to run them on the chip level, like if you're Qualcomm or like some of the chip company, maybe like even like Apple, you could map the weights of a model directly on the chip and then be able to like run it.
Yeah, absolutely. So much exciting stuff on the horizon. So, that being said, maybe going back to kind of talking about some of the challenges in the space, like, I think most people, when they look at agents, to your point, there was a lot of hype and still perhaps some hype in the system, but, there are companies like yours that are pioneering that path. Like, what do you think are like the major gaps, when it comes to agents today, or challenges that still need to be solved for us to get to that next level where they're just, something we can rely on?
Totally. So I think a big issue just becomes trust. Now, suppose you have this agent, it has its own brain, it's doing things for you, it's autonomous. And then you ask it to go book a flight, but maybe like goes and books you the wrong flight and spends $1,000 or something. And then you probably don't want to go use this agent because it's just like, okay, they're spending your money and like doing wrong things. And it's like, maybe not useful to you. And in a sense, that's basically what you want to avoid. Like, okay, like how do you build human trust? How do you make sure uh, things don't go wrong? And if there's something that goes wrong, can you like have a fallback mechanism? Can you ask users for help before you actuate really wrong things? And I think that that's a big problem. I think like I would say not even like anyone in academia is looking into this right now because it's just like too early. But us, because we are actively thinking about like how do you productize the system, how do you put them in production, we are spending a lot of time thinking about this right now. Because that is also the biggest challenge we foresee is like, okay, like now suppose you have billions of these agents running there and think so many things can run haywire. And how do you make sure and scale any sort of like system that can make sure like if you fail, you fail gracefully, have verification, and not like somehow break the internet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That would probably be a turnoff, right? It's like if it spends $1,000 on your credit card and buys the wrong ticket. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I think once we can trust them, and it just becomes commonplace. I mean, I think that's kind of that like vision that people had of like ambient computing, like 10 years ago, right? This persistent, pervasive computing. architecture that can be all around us. And I feel like we're getting there, perhaps even faster than I thought. So it was kind of because I used to do a lot of consulting with conversational AI in early 2017, 2018, right? So we had that initial kind of push, and we were kind of hitting this brick wall, right? It's like only the big enterprises really had the capacity and resourcing to actually build decent chatbots at the time. So yeah, I'm just glad that we have this new advancement that's really pushing this thing forward here. So on that notion, like, what is your specific vision of what like an agentic future looks like? I know there's a lot of talk regarding marketplaces. We're all kind of anxiously waiting to see what OpenAI does to actually monetize that store. But beyond that, we've also seen some companies start to talk about, some sort of blockchain element to kind of create co-owned agents and incentive models. But what do you think is the future here?
Totally. I think it's definitely possible to build a marketplace, but it's too early, right? Because unless you have something that you're using every day, people won't be going to the market and buying more things. So you need to have some penetration where people are actually using like maybe like like two or three things every day on an agentic level, and then you're like, okay, like now you want more things, then you go purchase them on the market and monetize. But I think you have to solve the 0 to 1 problem first before you build a market. And I think people are still at zero because like most people have not used the agent yet. And so you can create a marketplace and here's like thousands of agents and like let's try this and like none of the agents do anything useful. And I think so you first need to build like this useful stuff where like maybe like even like I can use it for 3 or 4 things, but it's really useful, it works, and I'm using it every day. Then I think you can go and build a market. And I think that's what some people have not realized. It's just you're jumping too far ahead where like unless you solve the problem first you can't go and like build a fully marketplace there. And I think that the same applies for even like Apple, for instance, right? Like they didn't go and like say like let's go build an app store before we build an iPhone. So to first build the iPhone, put some like apps there, people will use those apps, and then you can be like, okay, let's allow third-party apps and let's build a marketplace. And then so like people can download more apps, but you need to have some apps first before you have a marketplace. And I think that's sort of the thing that's needs to be solved in the agent space first.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of on the topic of that, building good agents, can you share like any best practices for, people that are looking to experiment and build agents for the first time on LangChain or any of the other frameworks that exist out there? Like what would you say to them if they're looking to explore that or build one of their own?
Totally. I think, yeah, there's definitely like a lot of experimentation, a lot of things. I think it's still early in the sense like a lot of things can improve on the infrastructure level, on the technology level, especially if you think about memory and like even like context and like reasoning. So I think a lot of these capabilities will improve. I think maybe like one good way to think is like suppose plan for like 10x improvement and build based on that. But I think like, the technology will still exponentially improve, and so you don't want to be bottlenecked. So you can like if you imagine like if everything was 10x better, faster, cheaper, what is the right thing can you build? And I feel like that's the right ways to think about agents right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So just highly iterative and just be testing and experimenting. That makes a lot of sense. Um, you know, on another note, I know that I think you guys recently raised some money, and that kind of just is a testament to the traction you all have been kind of pushing. So maybe any advice to early startup founders? Because I love the picture you put on Twitter. It must have been like 4 months ago, where it was like we're moving out of the garage into a proper office now. That was a good image. So like any advice to startup founders that are starting an AI startup, like anything that you can glean from that process so far?
Totally. Like definitely, I think it's a very iterative game. So I think you need to be very user first, understand the market, what users want. And I think grit is very important. We're like even when we started, there were actually a lot of like other people's trying to do agents, auto GPT and stuff like that, but everything has kind of disappeared. And for some reason we are the only people that people like only player people take seriously. And just been interesting to see like how much like grit and like how much it's almost like a marathon. And so you want to like be prepared for running the marathon and like being able to do that consistently every day. And I think that's I would say as a very good advice to early stage founders. Like even if you follow like Elon Musk's journey, I think he's been the most consistent person who has like innovated the most in technology. and he just puts like crazy amount of work every day, and it's just like like crazy amount of grit. And I feel um like he's probably like a very inspirational person to think about in terms of like, okay, like how you should build a startup.
Yeah, that's great advice. Grit is for sure a requirement. So for you specifically, like, this is our last question, but like, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired to keep building and innovating in this space?
Totally. So I would say there's like two answers. Like one answer is definitely we see the future is going to be very different. Society is very going to be very different in 2 years. And so we want to be an active force that can actually go and shape the future, because like we want to make sure like we are living in like a we feel like in a sense responsible, especially for me because I have the right background. I've been working on a lot of this agent stuff before in the PhD. And so I feel like somewhat responsible, like, okay, like I have this because I know how things work, and like I've like sort of trained in this area. I should like go and make sure like we actually build good systems out there, and like, okay, like people can use them in a good sense. And so can we be like sort of like uplift how agents are going to be deployed and like do that responsibly well. And I think we sort of like me and my co-founder and like a lot of our people, we have a lot of like Stanford PhDs and masters, and we just sort of like have so much exposure to AI. So we sort of like feel like we have a very good sense of doing this better than other people. And I think that's one sort of on the responsibility part, which keeps us motivated. Okay, we want to go and do this and actively shape how this will be deployed, because it like someone is going to do that, and we want to be the people that can actually do that really well. And so that's fun. On a personal level, I would say like what used to keep me motivated a lot, I think initially when I started was like, okay, like um, it's sort of like I feel like in a sense I'm building something that can automate all my work. And so the light at the end of the tunnel, it's almost like, okay, like you're doing a lot of work to end that work in a sense, right? And so it's like, okay, like I'm just like waking and getting out of the bed and just like coding, like you're spending like maybe like crazy amount of hours every day. Because you're thinking like, okay, like if you do this enough, one day you will have to not even do anything. And I think that that's just like a very interesting personal motivation. We're saying you're just spending all your hard work to end hard work in a sense and reach that point.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Great
yeah,
answer.
and that's also, I would say, how I define success in a sense for our agents. Like, suppose if our agents one day we reach that point where like everyone in the company is internally using it every day for a good amount of the work, then we know we have been successful in tackling this problem. Because unless we reach that point where like it's actually actively helping you every day, then it's not good enough. And it's only good enough when you can actually use it every day. It's helping you a lot and like making us more productive.
Absolutely. Interesting parallel because I remember watching a Sam Altman interview and I think he said something similar to you. He said, I think this might be the last hard problem that I ever get to work on.
Yeah, it's
So
going to be interesting. Like the future of work and the future of productivity, I think will be very different. I think we'll just be working on a very high abstraction, where like a lot of this will become conversation driven or even like thought driven at some point, and then like you have this AI systems doing the digital like stuff. Like no one will be going and like manually filling out spreadsheets in the future. Like that as a job won't exist.
absolutely. Well, hey, Div, truly appreciate your time. Before we leave, anything you want to share with the audience that might be watching, whether it's the existing beta or any announcements you have?
Sure. So I would say just watch out for, we have a lot of cool things that we are releasing very, very soon. So watch out for all our new releases. You can also like join our beta. So now we have a lot of people actually trying it out, and we are doing a lot of like cool stuff there. So you can play with it. We also have features where you can like teach the agent to do like become better at your workflows or personalize the agent to your task. And I think that's going to be very interesting. So to play with and like improve the agent on a user level. And what we are actually very privacy sensitive, so we're not actually storing or collecting any of the data. But then you can actually go and improve the agent for yourself, and then the agent can learn more things about you. And I think that's going to be very interesting, because if the agent is just knows so much about you, in a sense it's almost your friend. um, and then you can like rely on it. You can like ask you to do a lot of things on a very high level. You can just say like, oh, order my favorite coffee or order my favorite dinner dish and stuff like that. And just because it knows you can go and do that without adding a lot of friction. And I think that's what's going to happen, and what you're very excited about.
Amazing. Well, hey, we'll definitely keep our ear to the ground, keep our eyes peeled. Can't wait to see the app later this year. And thanks so much for your time.
Totally. Thanks a lot.